She's lying. Richard slammed his hand on the table. That child is not Alexander's. It cannot be. 3 doctors confirmed he is infertile. 3. He pointed directly at Maya across the room. She came from nowhere, a waitress. And now suddenly she's carrying the bishop heir. Someone in this room needs to say what everyone is thinking. The room went completely silent. Maya didn't flinch. She didn't look at Alexander. She looked at Richard, and when she spoke, her voice was so quiet that every person at that table leaned forward to hear it. "Sit down, Richard," she said. "I have something to show you." And she opened the folder. If that just stopped your heart, subscribe right now. Follow this story all the way to the end. And drop your city in the comments. I want to see exactly how far Maya's story travels. The night Maya Bennett's life changed, she was counting tips in a parking lot because she couldn't afford to look poor in front of her manager. $62. She counted it twice, hoping she'd miscounted the first time. She hadn't. $62, a write-up in her file, a landlord's text she hadn't opened yet, and a broken heel on her left shoe that she'd been walking on crooked for 4 hours. This was her life. She was 28 years old, and this was her life. She opened the text. 72 hours, no exceptions. After that, I changed the locks. She read it twice, put her phone away, stood in the parking lot and breathed. She had a rule: 4 minutes of feeling it, whatever it was, then you stand back up. She'd had the rule for 10 years. It had kept her functional, and it had cost her things she was still calculating. She was on minute 3 when the black car pulled up. She didn't know the man who leaned from the window. Large quiet, the specific kind of quiet that comes from not needing to prove anything. "Miss Bennett," he said, "Mr. Bishop would like a word." She went still. "I don't know, Mr. Bishop." He's aware. Every reasonable instinct she had said, "Walk away. Don't get in that car. You don't know these people, and you know exactly what kind of people they are. And you have $62 and your dignity, and you should walk to the bus stop right now." She thought about the text, the broken heel, the write-up. She got in the car. She would spend the next 6 months deciding whether that was the bravest or the most reckless thing she'd ever done. She still hadn't settled it. What had happened before the parking lot, her shift at Aurelio's, which was one of those restaurants where the menus have no prices because the people who eat there have never needed to look. She'd arrived 43 minutes late, which her manager Dennis received with the particular wariness of a man who has decided someone is disposable and is waiting for adequate paperwork. "The bus," she started. "I don't want to hear about the bus." She got her apron on and walked onto the floor with the smile she'd spent years building, the one that said everything is fine when the accurate statement was everything is held together with the specific tension of a person who cannot afford for it to fall apart. Table 9 was 4 women who didn't look up when she arrived. She stood there for a count of 7 before one of them waved in her direction. Not a greeting, a dismissal. "We've been waiting forever," the woman said. "I sincerely apologize. What can I get you?" One of them sent back a water glass for a smudge Maya couldn't find. She swapped it without a word. She had become very good at receiving small humiliations and converting them into $5 tips and calling that a living. She'd been doing it for 6 years. She was very, very good at it. By 9, the restaurant was running, hot kitchen behind bartender, out sick Dennis furious behind the bar. Maya moved through it, fast, efficient, invisible the way she'd learned to occupy spaces that didn't particularly want her. She was clearing table 7 when the front door opened and the room changed. She felt it before she saw it. The volume dropped half a register. 2 servers found urgent reasons to be elsewhere. Even the background music seemed to pull back. She looked up. 4 men, moving the way men move who have never been told to wait. 3 of them large, quiet, watchful. The 4th was different. Tall, dark suit, no tie. The kind of face that wasn't handsome in a way that made you comfortable, handsome in a way that made you careful. He moved through that restaurant like the room was already his, and he'd simply arrived to confirm it. Dennis's voice behind her, entirely transformed, warm, practiced, nearly reverent. "Mr. Bishop, right this way." Alexander Bishop. She'd heard the name the way you hear thunder from a distance. Not close enough to be dangerous. Close enough to know what the sky was capable of. She went back to her tables. She was not interested in powerful men. She was refilling water at table 11 when she heard the crash. 1 full tray of drinks. The floor. And then a man's voice, rising drunk, decided the specific pitch of someone who has chosen to make this a problem. She turned. Eli, she'd learned his name later, learned that he was 17. That it was his second week that he was saving money for his mother's hospital bills, was standing there with an empty tray and 6 drinks spreading across the jacket of the man at the next table. The man stood up slow, the way drunk men stand when they've made a decision about the evening. He grabbed Eli by the collar. "Get your hands off him." She hadn't planned to say it. It came out the way a reflex does already in the air before she'd made a choice. Quiet, absolute. Every head in the section turned. The man stared at her. He was large. He was drunk. He had never been spoken to this way by a woman holding a water pitcher. "What did you just say to me?" Maya's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it behind her eyes. Her hands behind her notepad were shaking. None of that was visible. "I said let him go. He made a mistake. If you'd like to speak to a manager, I will get you one right now, but you will let go of his shirt." 3 seconds. She counted them. The man released Eli's collar, shoved him back a step enough to claim something, and dropped into his chair, making noise about wanting his check. Maya turned away, pressed her hands flat against her thighs for 3 seconds, went back to work. She did not see the man at table 2 who had gone perfectly still and was watching her cross the floor with an expression he didn't often wear: genuine attention. Not strategic attention, the kind that arrives without invitation and stays without permission. Alexander Bishop watched Maya Bennett disappear toward the kitchen and thought with the cold precision that had made him what he was that he had just seen something worth understanding. She found out his name from Dennis after, when Dennis pulled her aside to tell her she'd been written up for escalating the situation with the drunk man. She barely listened. She was running the math: $62, $900 rent, $240 in her account phone bill in 6 days. She was on the 3rd pass through those numbers when she went to the parking lot. She counted her tips. She read the text. She got in the car. The restaurant had cleared out. Alexander was waiting in a private room at the back, and someone had placed a glass of water across from him before she arrived. Not wine, not coffee, water. Like he already knew something about her she hadn't told him. She sat down. He looked at her the way he'd looked at everything, like he was calculating something, and the calculation wasn't finished. "You stood up for a boy you'd never met," he said, "against a man twice your size." I didn't like what I was seeing. Most people don't like what they're seeing. They look away. I don't look away. Something shifted in his face, barely visible. 1 degree of temperature. "I noticed," he said. She waited. She was good at waiting. "I have a proposition," he said. "A business arrangement. Short version, I need a wife, temporary, legal, contracted. In exchange, every debt you have is cleared, completely, plus a monthly stipend that is considerably more than what you earn here." The room was quiet. "Why me?" she said. "Because you're not afraid, and you're not greedy. In my world, both of those qualities are nearly extinct." He paused. "I've been in boardrooms with people for 20 years and learned less about them than I learned about you in 2 hours. You watched me work a restaurant." "Yes." She looked at him. He looked back. He didn't fill the silence, and she noticed that a man who could sit in silence without reaching for it, that was rare. In her experience, it was either the mark of great patience or great danger. She wasn't sure yet which this was. "What's the reason you haven't said yet?" she asked. His jaw moved. "There is a medical situation that complicates the straightforward version of what I'm asking. I'll explain it fully, but not tonight. Tonight, I'm only asking whether you're willing to come back and hear the rest. You want me to agree to return before you tell me the part that changes everything?" "Yes." "That's a significant ask for someone you've known 2 hours. "I'm aware," he said, and waited. She thought about $62. She thought about the 4-minute rule and the broken heel, and the text from the landlord, and the write-up in her file, and the specific grinding humiliation of a life that was not getting better no matter what she did. Second meeting, and she said, "I agree to nothing else." "Of course," he said, and something in his face shifted, not a performance of relief, actual relief, the kind that doesn't know it's visible. She noticed. She was halfway to the bus stop when she realized she'd never told him her name, and he'd already known it, and she hadn't even paused at the time, and that right there should have frightened her considerably more than it did. She pulled out her phone, read the landlord's text one more time. Then she put it away and kept walking. 3 days later, glass tower, downtown, marble lobby, receptionist with a smile designed to communicate she didn't belong. Maya wore the navy blazer she'd pressed the night before, having told herself it didn't matter what she wore, and then pressed it anyway because some habits of self-respect survive everything. Jared Bishop was waiting. The resemblance to Alexander lived in the jaw and the stillness. But where Alexander's quiet felt like strategy, Jared's felt like a verdict being withheld. He looked at her the way you look at something you haven't decided about yet. "Mr. Bishop asked me to bring you up," he said. "Is that going to be a problem for you?" A pause. "I don't know yet." Elevator. 11 floors. The silence between them had texture, not hostile, not neutral. Gathering. "You're not what I expected," he said as the doors opened. "What did you expect?" "Someone who looked like she needed saving." "I don't need saving," she said evenly. "I need options. There's a difference." He held the door. Small thing. She filed it anyway. Alexander was at the window. He turned when she walked in and looked at her with that complete calculating attention that she was starting to suspect wasn't only calculation anymore. "You came," he said. "I said I would." He sat, folded his hands. 3 years ago, I had a significant medical event, confirmed by 3 separate physicians. He said it flat, a fact he'd had time to stop being surprised by. "I cannot father biological children." Maya kept her face still. "In the Bishop family, this is not only a personal matter. The succession structure, the entire framework of what this family is, requires an heir. Soon." He paused. "There is a surrogate, legally contracted, medically supervised, above reproach in every way. But for the family to accept this child as legitimate, they need to believe the pregnancy is natural. Mine." He held her gaze. "They need to believe there is a wife." The room was completely quiet. She sat in it. She let the full weight of it land, not managed, not minimized. She ran through every layer of what he was asking, and what it made her, and what it would require, and what it could cost. "The family," she said carefully. "Your brother is at the door." Jared's jaw tightened. "Jared knows everything," Alexander said. "Does Jared think this is wise?" "I'm standing right here," Jared said. "I know," she said without turning. "That's why I asked." A pause, then reluctant, genuine against what appeared to be his better judgment. Something that was almost a smile crossed Jared Bishop's face before he shut it down. "She's going to be trouble," he said to his brother. Not angry, almost impressed. Alexander looked at Maya with the expression she was starting to learn. The one that wasn't quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. "Yes," he said quietly. "Probably." She asked every question she had, all of them without softening them. Duration, contract terms, her rights, her obligations. Who knew what, and what happened if things changed, and what happened if she needed out. He answered everything, directly, without the slipperiness of someone managing her. 22 pages, real lawyer, binding and protective. She walked out with it under her arm. Jared rode down in the elevator. 11 floors of silence. Then, "Why are you actually considering this?" She thought about the clean answer, gave him the real one instead. "Because I'm tired," she said, "and this is the first time someone has offered me a real option instead of telling me to work harder and wait." He was quiet. The doors opened. "More honest than I expected," he said. "I'm a more honest person than you expected," she said and walked out. She found a bench, sat down, opened to page 1 of 22. She didn't know yet that the surrogate was already pregnant, that Alexander had chosen this specific enclosed location to tell her the elevator going down at floor 7 because he'd timed it, been precise about it. There's one more thing he'd say before she reached the lobby. Catherine, the surrogate. The procedure was completed 11 days ago. She's already pregnant. And Maya would turn and look at him and say, "You told me this hadn't started yet." "I told you the contract hadn't started," he'd say. "I was precise about the wording." "That's not the same thing." "No," he'd agree. "It's not." And the elevator doors would open and neither of them would move, and Maya would understand for the first time in the full physical sense of the word that she was not stepping into something that was about to begin. She was stepping into something that was already in motion. She read all 22 pages. Then she made the most consequential decision of her life, sitting on a bench in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. with the city moving around her like she was invisible the way it always had. She signed on Wednesday, with a pen she borrowed from the front desk. Her hand was steady. She made sure of that. She moved in on a Thursday with one duffel bag and two boxes she'd been packing emotionally for weeks before she packed them physically the way people do when they already know where something is going. She dropped her key through the landlord's mail slot without ceremony. She had never loved that apartment. She was not sentimental about places that had held her the way a waiting room holds you functional, impersonal somewhere to be until somewhere else becomes available. What she was not prepared for was how quickly the house became somewhere else. Eleanor ran the Bishop household the way a general runs a campaign, with precision, with loyalty, and with the particular authority of someone who has been there longer than the current leadership and intends to outlast it. She looked at Maya with the carefully neutral expression of someone who had seen arrangements come and go and had developed the wisdom to reserve judgment. "Dinner is at 7, Eleanor said, setting down Maya's room key. "The family is expected." Maya looked up. "Which family?" Eleanor's expression shifted one fraction. "The extended family. Mr. Bishop's mother, his uncle Richard, and his wife Margaret." She paused in the doorway. "None of them are aware of the full nature of your arrangement." Maya sat with that after Eleanor left. She sat on the edge of a bed that cost more per square foot than her old apartment, in a room that was larger than her old apartment, and understood in the full physical sense what she had agreed to. Not the contract language, the living reality of it. In 4 hours, she was going to walk into a dining room and be someone's wife to people who believed it completely. And she was going to have to sustain that, not with a single performance, but with the daily, ordinary convincingness of a life. She pressed her hands flat on the bedspread. Then she stood up and hung up her clothes. Elena Bishop was 71 years old and had her son's stillness and the particular quality of attention that doesn't announce itself and doesn't miss anything. She looked at Amaya across the dinner table with warm, measuring eyes and said in a voice that was gentle and entirely dangerous, "Alexander tells me you met at the restaurant." "That's right." "You were working there." "I was." Richard broad-faced genial in the way men are genial when geniality is a strategy leaned forward. "And how long have the two of you been?" "Long enough," Alexander said. Quiet, final, the way he ended things without raising his voice. Richard leaned back. Margaret, who had not spoken and seemed to have perfected the art of being present without being visible, touched her water glass and said nothing. Maya noted all of it, filed it, annexed, it kept moving. Elena asked real questions. Where Maya was from, what she'd studied, what she'd wanted before life had its own ideas. "I wanted to be a nurse," Maya said. Elena's eyebrows moved. "Why didn't you?" "My mother got sick the year I was supposed to start the program. By the time she was better, I'd been working full-time for 2 years, and the path back was complicated." "But you still think about it," Elena said. Not a question. "Yes." "Good," Elena said quietly, and then went back to her food in a way that closed the subject and left something warm in the air. Approval. Something genuine that Maya found she was unexpectedly grateful for. Jared arrived late, no apology. He sat at the far end and poured his own wine and looked at Maya with the measuring expression she'd cataloged from the elevator, except tonight there was something different in it. Incremental. Like a man who keeps expecting a thing to be one way and keeps finding it's another. He waited until Elena was in conversation with Alexander. Then quietly, "You didn't have to do this." She looked at him. "I know. He wouldn't have held you to it, whatever the contract says." "I know that too. That's not why I'm doing it." "Then why?" She thought about the clean answer. "Because Catherine wrote a letter," she said, "before everything, to the child she was going to carry, saying the child was chosen, was wanted." She held Jared's gaze. "I'm choosing this one." Jared looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at his plate and picked up his fork and said nothing. Maya understood in the specific way she'd gotten good at reading people who don't say what they feel that she had just moved into a different category for him. She wasn't sure yet which one, but different. She made it through dinner. She did not know as she went upstairs that Elena was still at the table. That she said to Alexander after everyone else had gone very quietly, "She's real Alexander." That Alexander said nothing, just looked at the door Maya had walked through. That Elena said, "That's either very good or very complicated." That Alexander said, "It's both." That Elena finished her wine and said, "It usually is." 14 days in the call came. She heard it through the wall, not words, just tone. The specific register of silence that follows information that changes the shape of everything. She was in the hallway. She stopped. The office door opened. Alexander stood in it, and his face was doing something she had never seen it do. Not cold, not controlled, undone, just slightly. Just at the edges where the architecture was thinnest. "What happened?" she said. "Catherine," he said. "Hemorrhagic stroke this morning." She was gone before the ambulance arrived. He said it flat, compressed the voice of a man putting something enormous into the smallest possible container because there was no other option right now. The pregnancy didn't survive. The hallway went very quiet. "I'm sorry," Maya said. And she meant it for Catherine, 26 years old, who had chosen something enormous with full information and still hadn't been able to choose this. "I'm so sorry." He looked at her. Something in his jaw was working. "The arrangement no longer exists in the form we designed," he said, "which means Section 14 of the contract." "Stop," she said. He stopped. "What do you need tonight?" she said. "Mount the contract, tonight." He looked at her like the question was in a language he hadn't spoken before. "Nothing," he said. "I need nothing." "Okay," she said. She went to the kitchen, made coffee, left a mug outside his office door, went to her room. She didn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, she heard the floorboards move in the hallway, then the sound of a mug being lifted from the floor. Then silence. It was enough. 3 days later, he came to find her. She was in the small room off the library she'd quietly claimed, not officially, just by frequency, the way people take ownership of spaces by returning to them. He stood in the doorway and looked at her with a directness that meant the thing was already decided, and this was just the saying of it. "The contract still stands," he said, "if you want it to. The reason for it doesn't." "No." He came in, sat, "Which means if you want to leave, the terms of Section 14 are clear. Everything promised to this point will be honored. You're telling me I can go. I'm telling you the choice is entirely yours." She looked at him. "What do you want?" He was quiet in a way that was not strategic, a man working something through in real time. "The succession question needs an answer before year's end, or my uncle challenges my position and the family fractures in ways I've spent 15 years preventing." He held her gaze. "But there is one solution remaining, one that solves everything." He paused. "It involves you." The room was absolutely still. "You want me to carry the child?" she said. "I want you to consider it, when you're ready, if you're ever ready." He stood, moved to the door, stopped. Catherine left a letter for the family. She wrote it before he cleared his throat. She wanted the child to know it was wanted, that it was chosen. Maya's throat tightened. "She sounds like she was brave," Maya said. "She was," he said, and walked out. Maya sat in the chair for a long time after, the tea cold, the book closed. She thought about Catherine, and about choosing, and about what it meant to want a child before it exists, and about Alexander's face in the hallway when he'd said she was gone, and about a mug lifted in the dark at 2 in the morning. She thought about 17 days that had already become a shape in her life she could feel the outline of clearly. She went to his office, knocked twice. "Come in," he said. She pushed the door open. He was at his desk, and he looked like a man staying functional through sustained will. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not through Section 14, not tonight. I'm not making any other decision tonight either." She held his gaze. "But I'm not leaving." He looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said quietly. She pulled the door closed, went to bed. That night, for the first time since she'd moved in, she slept. She told him on a Tuesday. The decision had been made and unmade 40 times across 11 days, and on the morning of the 12th, it was simply finished the way some things resolve in sleep that cannot be resolved awake. She went downstairs. He was at the table with coffee and a file, and the slightly removed expression he wore when his mind was running faster than his face. "I'll do it," she said. "The other option." He went very still. "Maya, 11 days, she said, not impulsively. "I want my own lawyer reviewing the new agreement. I want complete medical transparency at every stage. Those are my terms." He looked at her for a long moment. "You understand everything you're agreeing to." "That's why it took 11 days. He reached for his phone. "You'll have your own lawyer by noon." "I don't have a lawyer." You will, he said, and called. That was how it began. Not with resolution, with motion. Because Maya had learned that the only decisions worth making were the ones that held past the first morning, and this one held, and she kept checking, and it kept holding, and eventually she stopped checking. Elena found out within the hour. Alexander had made one call intended for his lawyer, and somehow Elena knew which Maya would come to understand was simply how Elena operated. She occupied the family's information the way water occupies available space. She came to dinner that night with flowers from her own garden, stems cut at careful angles, and held both of Maya's hands in the doorway and said, "You look tired." "I'm fine." "You look tired and you're saying you're fine." Elena squeezed her hands. "That's a woman who has been carrying something alone." She walked inside. Maya followed. Dinner was different, warmer. Elena's questions were real ones, not surveillance, but genuine mapping of a person she'd decided was worth understanding. She asked about the nursing program. She listened to the answer about Maya's mother getting sick without the performed sympathy that makes that kind of story feel worse to tell. She just listened and then said, "You still think about it?" "Every day," Maya said. "Good." Elena said, "Don't stop." Jared was late. He poured his own wine and watched Maya from the far end of the table with it measuring expression until Elena was occupied, then leaned forward. "You didn't have to do this." "We've had this conversation," Maya said. "This is a different version of it." He looked at her steadily. "Carrying a child for a family you've known 7 weeks, that's not an arrangement. That's a commitment." "I know what it is." "Do you know what it cost?" She met his gaze. "I know what everything has cost me, Jared. I've been keeping the ledger my whole life." She held it. "I know what I'm paying, and I know what I'm buying. They're not the same thing." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked away and picked up his wine. And she knew from the specific angle of his head, from the deliberate attention he gave to his glass, that she had passed something. Not a test, something harder than a test. His actual judgment. Richard complicated everything exactly 3 weeks later. She heard it at 11 at night coming down for water, the study door open. Richard's voice at the specific low pitch of a man who is saying something he wants to be heard by exactly one person and doesn't realize the acoustics of old houses are unforgiving. "The timing is convenient, isn't it?" Richard was saying. Surrogate dies 2 weeks later, the wife is suddenly pregnant. A woman who came from nowhere, no connections, no history, and now she's carrying the heir. A pause. "I want an independent paternity confirmation. Before any formal recognition. Before anything." Maya's hand tightened on the water glass. She walked away from the door, heart hammering. Not with fear. With fury, the specific white-edge kind that comes from being reduced to a suspicious variable by a man who has never looked at her directly. She went straight to Alexander's room and knocked. He answered in under a minute. He read her face and stepped back from the door. She told him every word, verbatim, because she had a precise memory and she wasn't going to soften it and she wasn't going to let him have a version that was easier to dismiss. He listened without moving. When she finished, the silence had weight. "He has no legal grounds," she started. "He has internal grounds," Alexander said, "within the family structure. Political, not legal. This is the move I've been watching for." His jaw was set. "I should have—" "Let him have his test," Maya said. He looked at her sharply. "What?" "Independent physician, independent lab. His lawyer chooses the facility. I will take every test he wants." She held his gaze. "I have nothing to hide." "Do you know?" "Then we give him the test. And when it confirms what we're telling him, we walk that confirmation into the family meeting and we put it on the table and we watch him try to build a challenge on a foundation that doesn't exist anymore." Alexander looked at her in a way that had been evolving across weeks. The calculation still present, always present, but with something underneath it now that the calculation didn't account for. "You're not afraid of him," he said. "I'm afraid of plenty of things," she said. "Richard is not one of them." The test happened the following week. Independent facility, independent physician chosen by Richard's own lawyer. Maya went alone. She sat in the waiting room with old magazines and antiseptic smell and was completely calm in the way she was calm before things that mattered, feeling underneath fuel, not interference. The physician was professional and visibly uncomfortable, clearly aware enough of who'd sent him to find the appointment awkward. She was courteous. She gave what they asked for. She thanked him for his time. She called Alexander from the parking lot. Done, she said. How are you? She noticed he asked that before anything else. Fine, how was your morning? A pause. Longer than it should have been. Results in 10 days. I know. Richard is going to hate what they say. I know that too. A pause, then quietly, Maya. Yes. Thank you, he said, for how you've handled this. She didn't say you're welcome because it wasn't that kind. She said go finish your morning and ended the call and sat in the parking lot for 60 seconds by herself and let herself feel all of it, the fury, the humiliation, the fierce protective heat of something she hadn't expected to feel protective of yet. Then she put the car in drive. Results came in 8 days. Delivered simultaneously to both parties, a detail Alexander had insisted on, which she respected. Jared set the copy on the kitchen counter without a word. She picked it up. Read it. Confirmation of pregnancy. Paternity consistent with Alexander Bishop. All findings within normal clinical parameters. He's going to say the sample was tampered with, Jared said. Let him say it. He's going to raise it at the family meeting. Let him raise it. She put the report down. What does his noise cost us if the floor were standing on is solid? Jared was quiet. Then in the tone of a man making an admission he hadn't scheduled, I didn't think you'd last 3 weeks. I know. And now, he stopped, started again. Now I genuinely don't know what to make of you. That's progress, she said. Don't push it, he said. But the corner of his mouth moved, and this time he let it. The family meeting was 4 days later. Maya didn't attend. She and Alexander had agreed her presence would make it about her rather than the facts, and the facts were what they needed the room to focus on. She waited in her room, her book, her cold tea, the particular, sustained patience of someone who has survived enough uncertainty to stop fighting the waiting. Alexander came back at 9:15. She heard his footsteps. She'd learned his footsteps without intending to the specific rhythm of them, the slight pause before the second stare. She heard him stop outside her door, knock once. Come in, she said. He stood in the doorway and she could see immediately that something was over but had left a mark. Richard withdrew his objection, he said. He withdrew it. Not gracefully, with implications and language designed to keep the door open later. But he withdrew. He leaned against the frame, real tired, not performed. The family voted to formally recognize the pregnancy. He paused. And the marriage. The room was quiet. Formally recognized, she said. That changes the contract. The contract is no longer adequate for what this actually is, he said. Your protections are stronger. You're standing the Alexander. He stopped. What does it mean to you, she said. Not to the family, to you. The longest pause he'd ever given her. She counted to 7. It means, he said carefully, that I planned very precisely for a specific outcome, and I find myself somewhere considerably more complicated. He looked at her directly, and I find that I'm not interested in finding my way back to the plan. Maya looked at him. Her heart was doing something she'd stopped trying to reason with. How complicated, she said. Considerably, he said. Go to sleep, she said. You're tired. I am tired. Complicated things keep until morning. They do, he said, and pushed off the door frame and walked down the hall. Maya sat in the chair in the quiet of the room that had become hers by frequency and felt something move through her chest that she was not going to name yet, because she was too careful a person to name things before she was certain, and she wasn't certain, not quite yet. She was 7 weeks pregnant and living as the wife of a man who had started as a business proposition, and somehow across 40-odd days the business proposition had acquired a weight and a warmth and a shape that business propositions are not supposed to acquire. She put her hand on her stomach. Barely a change yet, barely anything. You're wanted, she said to the dark. I want you to know that from the beginning. She closed her eyes. The complicated things kept until morning. The attack came on a Thursday at 11 in the morning while Maya was on the phone with her sister laughing about their mother's neighbor's wind chimes. She was 22 weeks pregnant. She had started to show. She had her free hand on the curve of her stomach, the way she'd started doing without noticing the body developing habits around things it has decided to love. The front door came open, hard. Jared walked in fast. Wrong immediately, Jared Bishop did not walk anywhere fast. It was a point of personal code. His face was the color of a man who has just received information that hasn't finished landing. Where's Alexander, he said. Maya was already standing. His office, what? Stay here. Jared, her voice came out like it had in the restaurant. Quiet, carrying. He stopped. Tell me what happened. He looked at her face and made the calculation fast. 2 men at the East Gate, car registered to a shell company that traces to a man named Dario Voss, second in command of the Marchetti family. 8 months of boundary dispute with Alexander. We think he's making a move. What kind of move? The kind you make before you make a larger one. Maya brought her phone up. I have to go, she said to her sister, and ended the call before the sentence was finished. What do you need from me? Jared looked at her stomach, then her face. Conflict, fast and resolved. East wing, interior room, no windows facing the gate. Eleanor will, I know where it is, she said. Go. She did not go to the east wing. She went to the hallway outside Alexander's office. Far enough from the front to satisfy the letter of what Jared had asked. Close enough to hear. She understood this was not the safe choice. She also understood that sitting in an interior room knowing nothing while something happened to people, while something was happening, was simply not possible for her. Through the door, Alexander's voice, controlled, in command, wound very tight underneath. Tell Voss I'll meet him at the gate. Myself, one man. He brings one. We talk. Another voice. Sir, that's not advised. That's what I said. Then Jared arriving. You can't walk to that gate alone. You're the one man. And Maya is in the east wing. Silence. She's not in the east wing, Jared said with the tone of someone delivering information and an accusation simultaneously. A pause. Where is she? Based on available evidence, Jared said, approximately 12 feet from this door. The office door opened. Alexander looked at her. Not angry, something more complicated. Concern and exasperation, and underneath both of them, something that had no clean label. Hallway, she said before he could speak. Interior. I heard everything. Maya. Go talk to Voss, she said. I'll be right here. His jaw moved. He held her gaze for 3 full seconds, long enough to say everything that the hallway and Jared and the gate didn't leave room to say. Then he walked past her. Jared paused beside her. East wing, he said. I got turned around, she said. That corner of his mouth again. He kept walking. 37 minutes, the longest of her life up to that point. She stood in the hallway and thought about the baby and Alexander at the gate and 8 months of a dispute she'd only learned about today, and the specific, unambiguous clarity of not wanting anything to happen to him. That thought arrived without warning and sat there completely settled. She had stopped pretending it wasn't true. The front door at 12:17. His footsteps. She tracked them the way she tracked his footsteps now, involuntarily, completely. He rounded the corner into the hallway, and he was intact, and something in her chest released so fast it made her lightheaded. He saw her face. I told you I'd be back. You told me not to move, she said. I didn't move. Almost a smile. Technically accurate. He stopped in front of her. Voss wanted acknowledgement. Territorial. A demonstration of access. I gave him what he needed and made clear what follows if this escalates. And handled. For now. For now, she said. In my world, he said, for now is most of what you get. She looked at him. The hallway quiet. The house settling back into its ordinary sounds. Alexander. Yes. What happens if for now isn't enough for Voss? We deal with it. We, she said. He met her eyes. Yes, he said. We. She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, go eat something you haven't since this morning. She turned for the stairs. Don't disappear into the office until you do. Maya. She turned back. I'm glad you didn't go to the east wing, he said. She looked at him for a moment. I know, she said, and went upstairs. He ate. She heard Eleanor's voice from the kitchen. 20 minutes later, brisk, slightly relieved, the tone of someone who was glad something had happened and wasn't going to say so directly. Maya lay on her bed and listened and felt the baby move and thought about the word we and how it had sounded in his voice. Richard showed up 4 days after Voss. Unannounced, Maya felt the house change the moment he arrived, a tightening in the air, specific and familiar. She heard it from the sitting room doorway. Richard's voice measured and warm in the way that meant most dangerous. I'm not raising an objection. I'm raising a question. Voss at your gate with your pregnant wife in the house. I'm simply asking if we've evaluated the risk fully. The situation is handled, Alexander said. Voss coming once is handled. Voss deciding once isn't enough. Richard paused. I have people who can help manage the Marchetti situation. I've been offering for months. The calculus changes when there are people to protect. His voice shifted softer. Think about who's most vulnerable in this house. Maya walked in. Both men turned. She looked at Richard with the warmth she'd spent years building completely genuine in its surface, giving nothing away underneath. Richard, I didn't realize you were coming. Can I get you anything? His eyes moved over her, recalibrating. She could see it happening. Maya, you're looking well. Feeling well, thank you. She sat down, not at the edge of the room, but at the table between them inside the conversation. Deliberate. I'm sorry, were you in the middle of something? Not at all. I was expressing concern about the Voss situation. How thoughtful. She folded her hands on the table. Actually, I had questions about the Marchetti dispute myself. It sounds like it predates Alexander's current position by several years. What's been the strategy from our side? Richard blinked. One small, fast blink. She caught it. It's complex, he said. I'm a quick study, she said. Please. 20 minutes. Richard explaining the Marchetti situation to a woman who had spent the previous 4 days reading everything Alexander would let her read about it. And in the explaining his proposed solution, emerged in enough detail that she could map it precisely seeding two strategic relationships to Richard's management, shifting the power balance within the family. That was the whole architecture of it. After Richard left, Alexander stood in the sitting room and looked at her. You knew the files, he said. You left the deeper ones on your desk while I brought you coffee, she said. Don't do that if you don't want me to read them. She held his gaze. His strategy gives him the Delgado connection in the northern relationships. 6 months from now, he has enough independent leverage to challenge your position without a family vote. You know that. I know. So why did you let him get that far into the pitch? I was curious how far he'd go. He looked at her. How do you do that? What you just did, giving him nothing to push against while taking exactly what you needed. She thought about it. I was a waitress for 6 years, she said. Your income depends on reading people. You get good at it. She stood. Don't let him back in without telling me first. She was at the door when he said her name. She turned. I planned for a contract, he said. I did not plan for you. He held her gaze. I want you to know that what you've done with Richard, with the family, with all of it, I did not anticipate it. I didn't know to anticipate it. A pause. And I find that I am that this is Alexander, she said gently. He stopped. I know, she said, and walked out. In the hallway she stopped, pressed one hand to the wall, breathed. Her heart was doing the thing, and she needed 30 seconds for it to settle. It didn't fully settle. She went upstairs anyway. 3 weeks later, at 25 weeks, she woke at 2 in the morning to a wrong sound. Not loud, its opposite. The specific wrongness of a sound that shouldn't exist in a house that should be sleeping. She lay still, listened. Then she reached for her phone and texted Jared East Corridor, someone in the house, because Jared had given her his number 2 weeks ago, saying only in case something needs handling without a discussion, which was Jared's way of saying he had put her inside his circle of people worth protecting. His response in 40 seconds, lock your door, don't open for anyone but me or Alexander. She locked it, stood in the middle of the room in the dark, completely calm in the cold, specific way, stakes too high for panic feeling underneath where it belonged. One hand on her phone, one hand on her stomach. Nothing is going to happen to you, she thought. I will make sure nothing happens to you. Footsteps in the corridor, multiple sets, low voices, a sound she couldn't name. Then silence. Jared's knock, 312. He told her the pattern. She opened the door. Clear, he said. Single individual. Staff entrance. He's detained. His face was doing a controlled job of not showing the adrenaline. He was in the East Corridor, 20 feet from this room. The weight of that sat between them. Richard, she said. Jared didn't say yes. He didn't say no. We don't know anything yet, but his eyes said something else. Is Alexander? He knows you're okay. I told him before I came up. She nodded. Underneath the cold calm, something large and hot was moving. Not fear, fury, the fury of a person who has done every careful thing and still had someone send a man 20 feet from her door. Jared, she said. Yeah. When you find out who sent him, I want to be in the room. He looked at her for a long moment. Maya. I wanted to bum in the room, she said again. Flat, clear. A pause. Then something moved in his voice that she'd never heard from him before. Something that was close to respect without the qualifier. Okay, he said. Alexander found her at 6 in the morning in the sky doing the gray thing between dark and light. He came in and sat across from her in her room and looked like a man who had made decisions in the dark that were going to cost something in daylight. His name is Pavel, he said. Contracts through a third party, 2 shell layers. Under the second layer, he looked at her directly. It's not Richard. She went still. Then who? Margaret, oh, he said. Richard's wife. The silence was absolute. Margaret, Maya said, who doesn't speak at dinner. Who has been managing Richard's finances independently for 9 years? Alexander said, with interests that don't align with his. He held her gaze. Richard didn't know. Maya saw the logic assembling. Cold, clear, complete. She wasn't after you. She was after the pregnancy. If I lose the baby, the succession reopens. Richard's challenge becomes viable. She wasn't working against you. She was working for him, without his knowledge. Yes. She used him as cover the entire time, Maya said. While we were watching Richard. Yes. Maya's hand was on her stomach. She had become aware of it as a conscious act rather than an automatic one. What happens now? That, Alexander said, depends on what you want. What I want. You're most directly affected, he said. How we respond, what we make known, what we hold, I want your input. As a partner. The word landed. It had been accumulating weight for weeks, and it landed now with all of it. We don't go to Richard yet, she said. We let him believe his challenge is still viable. We let Margaret believe she's invisible. We spend the next week tracing every financial thread, every decision she's made that we can document. She held Alexander's gaze. And then we walk it into the family meeting, not as an accusation, as a fact, clean and undeniable. The way you put the paternity results on the table, and we let the family see exactly what it is. Alexander looked at her for a long time. Jared said you wanted to be in the room, he said. I was already in the room, she said. This is what I heard. He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her for weeks, the way the calculation had somewhere become something else entirely. Something that didn't have a column in any ledger he'd ever run. Something that had been building since a parking lot and a water glass placed across from an empty chair. Okay, he said. Outside the gray was becoming light, the city starting its ordinary noise. Inside, Eleanor would be starting coffee, and Jared was somewhere reviewing footage with the focused anger of a man who takes it personally when someone gets within 20 feet of a person he's decided to protect. Maya sat in her chair in the room that everyone called hers now, without discussion, without ceremony, and felt with absolute clarity that she was done being a person things happened to. She was a bishop, formally recognized, and she was about to show every person in that family exactly what that meant. The family meeting was a Friday. Maya spent the week before it the way she spent things that mattered, working the details without visible anxiety feeling about it somewhere underneath where it couldn't interfere. She reviewed every document Alexander's team had compiled on Margaret. She asked questions when something wasn't clear and didn't pretend otherwise. She sat with Jared on 2 separate evenings while he walked her through the family's governance, the voting dynamics, who deferred to whom, which relationships were solid and which were transactional, which people in that room would follow evidence and which would follow whoever seemed strongest. Jared did all of this without being asked twice. She noticed. She didn't mention it. Thursday night, she couldn't sleep. 26 weeks. The baby moving in the particular way she'd come to know, small, insistent with opinions about being still too long. She lay awake and thought about Catherine. She thought about Catherine more than made logical sense, more than she could fully account for a woman she'd never met, who had made a choice and written a letter and been taken out of the story before she could see how it ended. She hoped Catherine would have approved of how it was going. She thought with the particular faith of a person who has been careful about hope that she might have. At 1 in the morning, she got up, went to the kitchen, made tea, sat in the dark, and said quietly to no one and to Catherine, and to whatever was listening, "I've got her. I want you to know that." She didn't officially know it was a girl yet. She'd been 30% sure since week 14 based on nothing except a feeling. She'd been right about harder things on less. She went back to bed, she slept. Morning. She dressed carefully. Not the navy blazer she'd outgrown it 4 weeks ago, which she found privately funny. That blazer she'd pressed for armor on the day of the second meeting. She wore a dark dress, simple and serious. She did her hair, looked in the mirror for 5 seconds, long enough to confirm, not long enough to doubt, and went downstairs. Alexander was in the entryway. Dark suit, no tie, the one he'd been wearing the first night she'd seen him move through Aurelio's like the room was his. He looked at her coming down the stairs, and something in his face did what it had been doing for weeks, the thing she'd stopped pretending not to see. "Ready," he said. "Yes," she said. He held out his hand. Not in the formal contractual way, in the way of someone who has gotten used to the weight of a specific hand in theirs and reaches without architecture. She took it. In the car, Jared turned around from the front seat and looked at her with the direct assessing gaze she'd cataloged since the elevator, except today it had something in it she'd only seen from him in fragments. Something that looked unmistakably like he was on her side. "You know what you're walking into," he said. "I know exactly what I'm walking into. Richard isn't going to take being outmaneuvered by someone he dismissed as a waitress. I know that. It might get ugly." "Jared," she said. "Yeah. I've been handling ugly since before you knew my name." She held his gaze. "Drive." The corner of his mouth. He faced forward. The car pulled out, 9 people in the room. Elena at the far end, silver hair, sun, stillness, eyes that missed nothing. Richard beside Margaret, both composed in the careful way of people who don't know yet how much the other person knows. 3 senior associates who had been in the bishop structure longer than Alexander, and who Jared had told her would follow, demonstrated competence every time. 2 of Alexander's direct team. Jared at Alexander's left, Maya at Alexander's right. 26 weeks visible, completely calm, a folder on the table in front of her. Richard looked at the folder, then at Maya, pleasant, recalibrating. "I wasn't aware we had additional agenda items." "Added Monday," Alexander said. "Your office was notified." "Of course," a smile. "The floor is yours, Maya." She opened the folder. She didn't look at Richard when she spoke. She spoke to the room, to Elena, to the senior associates, to the people who would determine what this moment meant. Her voice was level and factual, and she moved through the information the way she moved through hard things, without rushing, without drama, letting each piece land before adding the next. Timeline first. Pavel, his contracting chain, the shell companies, the financial routing at each step. Actual documents passed around the table because credibility lives in specificity, and she was giving no one the option of calling this vague. She reached the authorization signature on the second shell layer and stopped. "The name on this account," she said, "belongs to a holding entity established 9 years ago in the name of Margaret Elaine Bishop." She put the document on the table. 4 seconds of silence. She counted. Margaret's face had not changed. That was the most alarming thing in the room. Not Richard's color going to old paper, not the shift in the senior associate's posture, but the absolute stillness of a woman who had prepared for this possibility, who had spent years perfecting invisibility and was deploying it now at the highest possible stakes. Maya looked at her and then understood fully and finally that Margaret was the more formidable adversary of the 2, had always been, and everyone in this room had been looking at the wrong person. Richard said, "That's documented," Maya said, "at every step, completely." She looked at the senior associates, not at Richard. The intent of the action 3 weeks ago was to destabilize the succession by targeting the pregnancy. The documentation establishes this clearly. She closed the folder. "I'm not asking this room to decide what happens next. That belongs to Alexander and to this family. I'm asking this room to have the information it needs to decide correctly." Elena set down her pen, looked at Margaret. The voice that followed was quiet and carried the room entirely. Margaret, is there anything in that folder that is inaccurate? The pause lasted long enough to answer on its own. Elena, Richard started. I asked Margaret, Elena said without looking at him. Margaret looked at the table. No, she said. It's accurate. The room changed, not loudly, like pressure redistributing in a sealed space total immediate. Richard stared at his wife with the expression of a man whose understanding of a long marriage has just been revised in a single moment. You didn't know, Maya said to Richard. He looked at her. What? You didn't authorize this, Maya said. I want that on record in this room. Richard didn't know. Elena looked at her daughter-in-law. In those clear, measuring eyes, something moved that was beyond approval, something more personal and less easily named, something that looked like recognition. Richard said nothing. He was looking at his wife with an expression that wasn't the geniality, wasn't the calculation, just a man confronting something he could not immediately process. Margaret looked up. She looked at Maya directly for the first time in every room they'd ever shared. You were never supposed to last, she said, not with anger, with something that was unsettlingly honest. Nobody lasts who comes in through an arrangement. The ones before you didn't. You were supposed to want more money or get frightened or simply be manageable. Her voice was steady. You weren't. Maya held her gaze. No, she said quietly. I wasn't. In the car going home, nobody spoke for the first several minutes. Then Jared, without turning, for the record, I was wrong about you. I know, Maya said. I thought you'd fold under Richard. I know. You didn't fold. No. A pause. I'm not going to apologize for doubting you. I'm not asking you to. But he cleared his throat, the sound of a man making room for something that doesn't come easily. I'm glad you're in this family, he said, to the windshield, as an actual part of it. That's all. Thank you, Jared, Maya said. He nodded once. Alexander's hand found hers in the space between them. No announcement. The familiar weight of it. She turned her hand over and held his. Margaret was removed from the family structure within the week. Quietly, thoroughly, with documentation that ensured it couldn't be reversed. Richard, stripped of leverage he hadn't known he'd been using, requested a private meeting with Alexander that lasted 2 hours and produced something that wasn't forgiveness, but was functional. He didn't come to the house again. He sent a card when the baby was born. Maya kept it. Some things you keep, not because they're good, but because they're honest about what they are. Elena came 3 days after the meeting and sat with Maya in the small room off the library, the room everyone now called Maya's without discussion, and they drank tea, and Elena talked about Alexander as a boy in the way mothers talk about their children when they trust the listener with something real. He never asked for help, Elena said, not once. When his father died and he was 24, with something enormous inherited, he never said, I need someone. She looked at Maya. He asked for a contract. That was the closest he knew how to get. Maya looked at her tea. I know. He's asked you for more than that, Elena said, even without those words. I know that too. Elena was quiet a moment. You're going to be extraordinary at this, she said. Not the politics, though. You're very good at those. I mean the rest, the part that actually matters. Her eyes moved to Maya's stomach, the part that keeps. Maya's throat tightened. I learned from a letter, she said. A woman named Catherine. She wrote it before she had to the child she was going to carry. That the child was chosen, wanted. She paused. I think about it every day. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across and put her hand over Maya's, not performing comfort, just present. Then she picked up her tea and said, the nursery chair needs to be on the east wall. Tell Alexander. He'll need to be told twice, Maya said. Tell him twice, Elena confirmed. She told him twice. He moved the chair. The baby arrived on a Wednesday morning, 7 hours of labor, and Alexander there for every one of them, not filling the silence, not performing support, just there the way he'd learned to be present without requiring anything from the presence. At hour 4, through gritted teeth, Maya said, I need you to be quiet right now. He said okay, and was quiet. She would think later that this was the moment she was completely certain about him, not the grand gestures, the okay. 7:12 in the morning. A girl, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Alexander's jaw and Maya's stubbornness apparent from the first 30 seconds. The sound she made was the loudest thing that had ever happened in Maya's world. Maya held her, shaking not with fear, with the reality of holding something that was unmistakably the most important thing that had ever happened to her. "Hi," she said, just to her. "Quiet. I've been waiting for you." Alexander beside her as she felt him, before she saw him, had learned his presence the way you learn the weight of something you carry everywhere. She turned. His face was completely open. All the careful containment gone. Not broken, just honest. The kind of honest that doesn't have a performance attached. "She looks like you," he said. "She has your jama," Maya said. "She's already making a decision about something." Maya looked at the baby who was surveying the world with focused, assessing seriousness. "That's fair," she said. They named her Claire, after no one in particular, after the quality of light on a certain kind of morning, after the feeling of knowing something clearly that you had only suspected before. 2 weeks after Claire came home, Maya was in the nursery chair on the east wall, light coming in right, all of it arranged the way Elena said, with the baby asleep on her chest, which was both their preferred position. Alexander came to the doorway. "You should sleep when she sleeps," he said. "I know. You're tired." "Not that kind. The tired of someone who has been running at high intensity for a long time and has arrived somewhere that doesn't require it and whose body hasn't fully trusted the arrival yet." He came in, sat across from her. Claire made a small, involuntary sound in her sleep, the sounds of a person whose entire existence is still new enough to surprise her, and both adults went completely still, then relaxed when she settled. "I have something to say," Alexander said. "Should I be worried?" "No." He held her gaze. "I've been trying to find the right way to say something for approximately 3 months, and I've concluded there isn't a right way. There's only saying it." She waited. She was still good at waiting even now. "I didn't plan for this," he said. "Not the way it went, not who you turned out to be, not what He looked at Claire, then at Maya. "I love you," he said. The way he said facts clearly, completely without decoration. "I have for a while. I didn't say so because I didn't know if it was something you wanted or something that would complicate what we already had. But you told me once to say the thing I wasn't saying." He held her gaze. "I'm saying it." The nursery was completely still. Maya looked at him, at the face that had started as a calculation and become across months of cold tea and 2 in the morning footsteps, and a folder on a table and a hand held in a car, and a gate confrontation and an okay at hour 4 of labor, the face she looked for first when anything happened. "I know," she said. He waited. "I've known for a while," she said. "I was waiting for you to catch up to saying it." She shifted Claire gently. "I love you too. That's also been true for a while." Something in Alexander Bishop's face let go, all the way. The last of the careful architecture of a man who had held everything together for so long that he'd forgotten what it felt like to put something down. He looked at his daughter and his wife in the east wall light and exhaled in a way that had nothing to do with breath. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. Claire slept. Outside, the city kept its ordinary noise. Downstairs, Eleanor was doing something purposeful. Jared was somewhere reviewing something that didn't need reviewing because Jared expressed care through vigilance and always would. Elena had called twice this week and stayed on long enough each time to actually check on Maya, not just the baby. This was the shape of the life. This was what $62 and a broken heel and a decision made on a park bench reading 22 pages had become. Maya Bennett had walked into Alexander Bishop's world through a back door with a borrowed pen, expecting an exit strategy, and had built instead something that had no exit because it was not a room you left, it was a life you lived. She had chosen it, every step, eyes completely open. The whole difficult, complicated, irreversible truth of it was exactly this. She had been underestimated her entire life by people who saw a waitress and stopped looking. And she had stood in a dining room with a folder and she had made them look. She had made them all look. Maya Bennett had walked in from nowhere, and she had become the woman nobody in that family would ever again make the mistake of looking away from.